I'm really driven by the belief that we have the infinite capacity to contribute to what matters to us.
My first question to you is, can you please explain to people watching what you do? No small task, because you do everything.
Right. Well, hi, it's good to be here. Yeah, so what I do, I kind of work in three arenas. One of them is in organizational systems. So work that I do in that domain is really about creating high performance, purpose-driven teams and organizations. And that is done by way of really, and probably what we'll talk a lot about today is presencing a catalyst within the organization that agitates and stimulates and provokes a want to depart from the status quo and to begin to step more into our creative abilities. And the way we do that so effectively is by helping center an organization on a sense of purpose that's beyond any one person in the organization. The second leg of the stool is my work with individuals, couples, and families, which in a lot of ways is similar, but it's about giving people a chance to really architect their next chapter with intention and purpose. And to really understand, to say, I can influence conditions that favor the future I want. I can understand and bring into my day-to-day existence a better sense of like who I be and why I am. And then the third leg of the stool is really focused in community. And it's about bringing together people around conversations that are deeply meaningful to them, and bringing to life, community and action in different arenas, whether it be a business arena, but more of what I'm interested in is, what would be described through sort of a faith context would be kingdom work. How is it that we create conditions that are more like the concept of heaven, right? How do we make a more loving existence available to us at any given moment? How do we use our influence to be able to open doors and create opportunities for those that for whatever reason are left out of a lot of opportunities? But at the center of it for me is just give you a taste of like, well, who am I in all this? Is that I'm really driven by the belief that we have the infinite capacity to contribute to what matters to us. And we're not resources to get used up and retired. We have this inherent infinite capacity, but we need to be connected to things that matter. And what my life's work is about is how to create a world where we can simply be more fully expressed and fully presenced in all we do, that we're not like setting parts of us aside to fit, that we bring our entire presence into whatever it is that matters to us. So that's me.
You had the sentences and the words and the concepts you have used to describe what you're doing just are resonating with, yeah, that makes sense. That's great. Terrifying and enlightening at the same time. And I don't mean enlightening as much as lightning. Like when you have the opportunity to be your full person, that's just a huge relief.
Wow. I love that you said that, lightning. I got to remember that. A lightning. Yeah, it's a liberation.
So when I was talking to Brent about coming on and kind of like what it was like, we were catching up, and I had explained to him how just about a year ago, I just decided like, gosh, I want to be happy. I want to be passionate again. I want to find the thing that sparks with me and that really speaks to me. And how, Jodi, you've literally witnessed it like every week and it's happened. And, finally feeling like I'm at this place where it's all coming together. It's been about 10 months and it's all coming together. And this idea that, when I started to live this purpose, when I was very purposeful and intentional about how I wanted to live personally and how I wanted to work professionally, and honestly how that engages with the community, because it's the same thing for me. I feel like we all kind of have those three legs that you talked about, and it's just finding our own personal matrix for that. So It was I feel like I have way more energy now. I'm willing to work not like more hours, but it's like I'm so interested in all of those different elements. I'm willing to put the time and the effort and the energy in.
Yeah.
And even the way that I'm respecting myself now, I'm eating better. I'm, taking care of myself. And it's like now I have the energy to actually do it.
And
And,
then
you just dive in and it just sort of, and then you do the work and it happens, right? Right. I mean, how does it work for the people that you're working with, Brent?
You make a really critical point. Like transformation, Lauren, is what you have been undertaking. And when we really think of the roots of what does that actually mean, right? It means that even the metaphor that we've all become so familiar with, where the caterpillar turns into a butterfly, but the part that we're now have a better understanding of scientifically is when that caterpillar is provoked, like happy as that caterpillar, when it goes into that crazy, like feverish process of building that chrysalis, is at its happiest it's ever been. It's fatter than it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's just like enjoying its best life, eating the shit out of everything, right? And right, and that's what it was like. Oh man, look at me, I'm like huge. And then all of a sudden, it's like, ooh, what's that? And literally, there's about 5% of its genetic programming wakes up and turns on itself, and it like provokes a death. So when that thing goes into the chrysalis, it doesn't just like pop out wings, whatever. It actually dissolves into goo, this unformed matter, and then it completely re-exists itself.
Yeah.
And so, with Lauren, part of like the transformation that we see happen is there's a lot of stories, right, that become something, whether they be true or not, that become our sense of identity. And I believe that stories are something that we give life to if we choose to. And so transformation is about allowing those stories to die. It's about, okay, well, what are the stories that are actually closer to who I actually am? And that, Lauren, like your boost of energy and the want to be in a place where you can just take this on. That's what I mean by like infinite capacity, right? It's like, oh, well, where I am is not enough. I'm going to get healthier. I'm going to get fitter. I'm going to mentally, physically, emotionally, because there's something I see now I didn't see before. And I've given myself permission to go pursue it. Oh my gosh. I mean, what other seductress is better than that?
That's awesome. The glop, the mess is very uncomfortable. And the emergence could be really beautiful.
Here's the thing. When you're in that goo, the messy uncertainty, it's actually described as a liminal state. It's that chaotic state between two states. Like, for example, when water turns to gas,
right,
there's a space in between where it's neither and nothing. It's like, it's kind of in this weird moment. Anything's possible in that time. So pay attention. Because here's the thing, in our rush through the transition, we usually fixate on some other story that is the one we think it. And you know what? When we try to create a destination that's like fixed, when we try to live into a described thing, if we're using even descriptive language to articulate it, we're already foreclosing on possibilities beyond what we already know, because we can only describe what we've seen and what we know. We need to declare what a possibility that may not have language that is adequate to describe it, because it has never existed before. So we wind up foreclosing on new things because we rely on having to describe everything, and we think that we need to be able to describe it so others can understand it. No, how can you understand what's never been?
You nailed the conflict that I often see in business. It also, you were talking about the personal experience, but it's also in a business that the desire to solve a problem or to become, let's talk about sustainability, to become sustainable is all focused on tasks and outcomes as opposed to process, right? And so that's very interesting. That feeds at a lot of different levels. And then you talked about language, and that's one of my fascinations. How can you, how do you, maybe this is how do you work with people to understand those potential futures without having the words to assist them?
One of my favorite quotes, Rilke quotes, which from Letters to a Young Poet, is most experiences are where words have never gone. When you are digesting things through language, it is linear, sequential. It favors the analytical mind. The way that I coach folks into a place where they can language this stuff is to short circuit their brains want to rationalize and have it make sense. And so one of the techniques is to provoke you with a question and then tell you, like, I don't even care if you know what you're about to say, just open your mouth and start speaking. We need to get into the precognitive, into the presentient parts of our bodies to understand we're receiving all kinds of information in many ways. There are words for it, but if we let our brains get a hold of it, it's gonna dumb it down into something that makes sense. And what a shame that is.
Right. It's like what occurred to me just now, Dead Poets Society, when he makes him get up and gawp from that Walt Whitman poem. That's exactly, that's what came into my head when you said that, where he's tapping into the emotional response and the action of using a word that's not even really a word. And that's more powerful in freeing him than actual words. And I've dominated the conversation, Lauren. I'm sorry.
No, you have not. No, you're both kind of.
We're dancing. Jodi and I are dancing.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm a dancer.
And I'm just like, sometimes I'm more like, I'm just witnessing, so it's fine. I'm taking it in too. So let's talk about, for the people who have shifted and are in a growth zone, how do we continue to grow?
Yeah. Well, if you have an answer, like, by all means.
No, we're asking you.
And there was space, and now
just open your words or open your mouth.
That's right. Stop thinking about it. Just speak.
The language doesn't matter here. That's
right. So I this is something I think a lot about, and so let's think about the pandemic for a minute. If we look at it in a certain light, you would be able to sort of describe it as it's nothing more than a catalyst with unique constraints and conditions that invited an opportunity to prove a whole lot of things that were being said were impossible to be fully possible within a couple of weeks, like virtual school, like virtual work, like all these other things, right? The ability for our government even to be able to step in and, extend stimulus, all this kind of stuff. It also had horrible side effects of the masses amounts of people passing away and having a shorter lifespan than they needed to because of it, right? So, okay, catalyst at gunpoint. What if we looked at catalyst in a different way? What if we said, what if we created a catalyst or revealed a catalyst of our own design that had attributes to it that caused an effect where we're not at gunpoint, that we are able to thoughtfully respond, not just try to rationally react, but thoughtfully, consciously respond, and to have the same level of influence and gravity as the pandemic did. And I think my experience is not only can we, but when we do, crazy shit happens. but by design. If you don't want it to go back to the way it was, then hold the line. And that's all it takes, right? If we all just said, you know what, I'm unwilling to let that go anymore. This is no longer okay with us. We're starting, I'm hoping that, that finally, maybe we hit a tipping point in racial justice. Maybe that when I look at organizations are latching onto this, right? I can't think of a company that isn't taking on some sort of D&I initiative. there's a whole other topic there we could get into, but that maybe we can finally make some enough of the population said no more, that maybe we can tip it. And that's the thing that I think we forget, is we can tip any way we want if we simply hold the line, and we don't have to wait for anyone to do so. The rest will, like all the institutionalized systems, will follow along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm experiencing right now, is the pressure to hold a line in the work that I do when the systems want to get back to normal. And it's like I've become a little more outspoken, and I've become quite a bit more frustrated. And it's how do I warned Lauren that this would be a Jodi therapy session, but I don't mean it to go there. It's interesting trying to find the ways to hold the line within the constructs that you're operating in.
I think that the same thing, especially in design and construction, that's where I seem to be beating my head up against a wall, is that I have a very specific idea in mind, and I believe that it should cost a certain amount. I believe that there is a way that it should cost a certain amount. Mm-hmm. And I keep getting told, no, that's not how it works. And it's all incentivized, and it's this and it's that. And I go, well, then we're not being creative enough. We're not getting to the root of the issue. What I'm being told is that for a low income housing here to be sold for $150,000, you build it for $300,000 and it gets incentivized. Explain to me how somebody who makes $30,000 a year affords a $150,000 mortgage. Doesn't work, doesn't pencil out. Yeah. And if it's being incentivized by 50%, that's literally ludicrous. It is not a sustainable model. And that's the part that I find infuriating, is that if you talk to anybody who's in the industry, nope, this is what it costs. Well, then quite frankly, I don't want to work with you, because you're not doing it right.
I love what you're sharing, because I was taking on some really interesting training, and one of the things that it's all about, like bringing it. It's about, if we can make private conversations public, we may have a chance of bringing about some change. And one of the attributes that were critical to it was, what are you pissed off about? How do we think this through? We just haven't asked good enough questions. If this is the only solution, I'm going to keep asking those questions, because the fact that that's the solution pisses me off. That right there is a sustainable catalyst, one that you can design as a way to get you toward what you want to do and pour yourself into it.
Yeah. And I'm asking the questions. I'm coming up with alternative paths to like get there, ways that I don't think other people are thinking about. And I'm going to figure it out. Like, that's the goal. The goal is I'm figuring it out. And this all kind of started from me wanting to build my own house, and me building literally like an designing an 800 square foot house and being told point blank, that'll be $250,000 in this market. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's not true at all. Like, sorry, check your math.
Did you get a pat on the head too? Like, dear.
No, luckily it was all by phone. It was all by phone. I think that what ends up happening is that people are so used to their own status quo, and they haven't stepped outside to reinvent what it is that they're doing. They haven't found their own passion to go in, and like the math is the math, right? So they step into this job, they've been doing it, they figured it out the first time, they've got a funding stream, they can keep doing it. Like the trim tab, right? Like when we talk about Buckminster Fuller and his, trim tab and everything, like it's just somebody who looks at it and just cocks it, a half a degree or even a degree or whatever it is, to make a whole other vast opening take place. And then that's the ripple effect that gets people going, well, if you can do that there, then we can do these 3 other things. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the people when I say low income housing, I expect you to be able to buy a house for $50,000 in this area. That's what I expect. I expect that somebody should have a safe, healthy, environmentally sound home from an operational standpoint, a human health standpoint, an environmental health standpoint. And there should be an entry point that literally everybody can access. Might not be the world's biggest home, but it's safe, it's secure, it's healthy. Like, these should be basic fundamental human rights. And the fact that it's not, that's crazy to me.
So I have a recipe that works. You guys want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay, it's hard, but it does work. and here's the recipe. The recipe is for anyone that's interested in making change, introducing new ideas. I encourage you to go out of one way or the other thinking to what degree can I get to some sort of ideal that would be worth putting effort in. It's a stepping stone along the way. Otherwise, it's gonna be a tough road. The second thing is what you want to get people to fall in love. What you want them to fall in love with is a story that they want to be in and be able to tell. What's the story that they would fall so deeply in love with that they'll fight harder than you? And so in Lauren, your story, there's multiple versions of it, and they may be like 1 degree from each other, is to create stories possible based on what those that need to buy it care about, and try them on. And do it over and over again until you find the tuning. You need to find the right music that's going to just enrapture that person. If you do, they will fight right there with you in the front lines of that battlefield. And so keep trying different. Don't worry about your story because nobody cares. They care about theirs. They care about the one that they want to live into.
It's the story that wins that opens the mind's eye of the person you're speaking with.
It's actually in the listening. I believe that listening is an opportunity to create a vessel to allow someone to pour themselves into. Your story can create a container. Your listening invites them to pour themselves into that story. And they may discover something about themselves they never realized if you let them pour into your story. Instead of saying what's broken, maybe it's about what's missing. What if we created this? It would sort of obviate all this other stuff that will be useless because of this new thing. Is a much more, we'll say, human spirit encouraging way to come at things. Because, a lot of folks I'd say a lot of, we'll call it younger change agents, they come out into the world pissed off, which is good, but everything's about being pissed off about what's wrong. Yeah. And boy, if you're talking to someone that may had a design influence on what is, then you're calling them wrong, and that's not going to go so well.
It's interesting. I'm trying to playing these scenarios through my head, and one of the struggles that I've experienced, which might be a common struggle, is working with people who are very comfortable, and we've talked about this a little bit already, with the status quo, and become about minimizing risk. And so listening to them enough to find where they're willing or what story sparks them to accept some risk is something I haven't gotten good at yet. So that's just a revelation for me. Watchers out there, that's a revelation for me.
Yeah, well, one thing that you might try is what could you create through story that would shift that energy from risking what is to the uncertainty about what could be. Design better questions for them. Have every meeting be wildly curious on your part about what's the nature of this person I'm speaking to. And if you can get them in that, they're going to listen to you more deeply once you finally get around to saying what it is you want to say.
Here's a question. How do you keep yourself engaged in this process? Because it is there's a lightning in revelation, but there's probably also a lot of frustration in the resistance that you probably encounter. So how do you keep yourself going?
Oh man. A lot of work on myself first and foremost, in understanding, boy, how do I put this? If human hands are on it, then enter with like real grace, humility, and humbleness, because it's gonna get messed up. and and we kind of wander and we get distracted and get things influence us, whether we know it or, you know, all that stuff happens. And one of the things I find that is a really powerful thing for me is if we can, you know, if we can center like human pursuit and passion on an idea and not a person, things tend to work out a lot better. Um, and if they get centered on a person,
Gotcha.
things get pretty dangerous because, and I'd say we're all guilty of this, is as soon as it becomes centered on a person, then we put an impossible set of obligations on that person when they're just as flawed as any of us, and they're going to mess it up. And then, you know, we hold our politicians, we hold movie stars, we hold all these people in authority. We love to hold them into these impossible positions. And the kind of suffering it takes to actually stay in that, the obligations that we put on other people, is the unhealthy expression. I mean, you see it all the time, all these people in positions of power, and then on the sidelines, there's all these terrible shenanigans going on, but we created the condition that was the only way to maintain that position. We need to seriously re-examine, you know, the professionalization of the political system. It is because it is now a professional vocation, it wants to sustain its own existence, and it will create all kinds of complexities to have it be that to enter into that domain, you are left as a shell of a human being to survive it. You know, one of the practices I have is when I do experience, oftentimes when the idea of introducing something new into the system, I end up as a facilitator being attacked because like people get scared and when of the unknown, and when they get scared, they tend to attack. And sometimes I'm on the other side of that. And one of the things I have to continue to work on is my ability to not let that rub off.
Yeah.
Because if I'm then I'm compromised. I'm no good anymore in that position. So like an ontological shower every now and again to sort of wash off. My friend Wendy talks about that concept. Take an ontological shower and get clean from whatever influence you had from the system you were just in. And you know, for me, that's actually making sure that I maintain my relationship with the supernatural and the divine. Because like when you look at, okay, well, what is it that I can go to that's beyond human, to sort of come to a place of truth again? That really helps.
One of the things you mentioned is it's almost like not being defensive. Instead of when I feel myself being defensive, it's almost taking a deep breath and saying, and then welcoming the attack.
Yeah, what are you protecting? That's always a great question. If I'm being defensive, what am I protecting right now?
Right. So I take a deep breath and say, okay, somebody's attacking this thing that I did. I feel like they're attacking. They're probably not attacking, but I feel like they're attacking. And instead of defending that thing, I'm like, okay, help me understand what you mean, because I don't I need to see how my words or how my structure or how my presentation is being received by you to understand where to go. It's not easy. It's exhausting.
That's where that portion of the 4 agreements has been so helpful, right, Brent? Have you read it? Yeah, so this, you know, to not take anything personally, to also be impeccable with your words, to also do your best, but not to take anything personally, because really, I mean, you being attacked is not anything to do with you. It's always whatever's happening on the inside of that person. It's a reaction of something that's happened to or with or about that person. And
reflection on what you were saying, you know, you're asking like how does this group of unsatisfied with the status quo survive it? Get curious. If you're noticing that your defenses are up, if you're noticing that your emotions are starting to you know, show up around you, if you're noticing people are reacting in a certain way, if you're noticing that I'm not making progress, get curious and ask, like, what's that about? Tell me, like, I'm noticing that this has kind of got you aggravated. Tell me, did your experience, like, get curious, like what's going, is like the antidote. It's like pouring water on the fire. It is.
No, that's fantastic. And I think as soon as you express curiosity, you're welcoming somebody to share their ideas with you, which I think doesn't happen quite enough.
So, I mean, I've got like a personal hero, but it's like someone you've never heard of probably. His name is Mel Toomey, and he's kind of the quiet godfather of organizational development, and the idea of, why is it that his question that he's been pursuing his whole life is for organizations that talk so much about how you can grow with them, that businesses absolutely stifle growth in human development. Like, what is that about? And he's the one that sort of introduced me to through my relationship with him, is when I discovered that I wasn't alone in my misfit things I was seeing in the delusions of what's possible. And someone like Elon Musk, who, when you look at all the little bits and pieces of that story, it's always been in the context of preparing for having a second choice on where humanity can live.
Mm-hmm.
Every single business and decision was about perfecting a technology that was about something so far out. And at every moment, the status quo said, you can't do that. It will fail, guaranteed, highly scrutinized, and every time have been proven the other way. That's what I, talk about, whether you like him or not. Like, just look at that as an example of, there's a bigger context for what I'm doing right now. And I'm going to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been incredible, but also using the things that we need to understand about the current way business works, which is, let's do it through thriving businesses. Let's do it by disrupting industry. Let's do it by perfecting technology, making, all the stuff we love in our capitalist society about making billions of dollars as well. And then it's the underground heroes that don't care about the headlines, that are bringing about and willing to have the conversations like we're having right now,
mm-hmm.
about what's really going on out there and how can we all play a part when it isn't a headline we're interested in. That's the population that I just love to hold space for, so that they can find each other and conspire.
Like, as you see it in the world, what needs focus?
The epidemic of loneliness.
Yes.
We don't actually have an aggregate understanding of the huge side effect of loneliness, but loneliness and how it's compensated for typically ends up being in depression, in suicide, in consumption, addiction, in prostitution, human trafficking, sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is the second fastest growing industry in the world. And it's right under our noses. I'm a huge, I'm in a deep, let's see, I'm trying to, what's the word for it? Trying to shed a light on the fact that sex trafficking is one of the most perfectly designed industries, because it's right in your neighborhood and you don't even know it.
What?
How it is that we are satisfying our need for connection is unbelievable in what it's causing. And the fact that it's so simple, the antidote, which is, when you feel somebody's on your mind, pick up the phone. Don't assume they're okay.
Yeah.
When you walk by a neighbor's house, like, say hello, bring them, bring them flowers. Like, make sure that you're reaching out and make sure you're asking for what you need. Like, the antidote to this is simply connection and community. And this is like, before the pandemic hit, this was the costly, I mean, it's more dangerous than smoking, the side effects of loneliness.
This has been Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
Brent, thank you so much. This was exceptional. As always, I knew you were going to be an awesome conversation. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
This is great. You guys are awesome, and keep doing this. When you bring your, you had mentioned your son or whatever, I'm really interested in tuning into what does the generation coming up see and want. I think for any of us that are hitting our middle age, it is in our best interest to be channeling what they're thinking, not so much what we're thinking. And I'd love to be part of that.